Islam Makhachev has done it again. The pound-for-pound king has successfully defended his welterweight championship, extending his UFC winning streak to an incredible 17 consecutive victories after defeating Machado Garry by unanimous decision in the main event of UFC 330. And this is defeating Anderson Silva's 16-win streak record, setting history in MMA. On the surface, this looks like another dominant performance from one of the greatest fighters we've ever seen. Islam controlled the grappling exchanges, repeatedly put Garry in difficult positions, threatened with submissions, scored takedowns, landed a nice knockdown, and ultimately did enough over 5 rounds to convince the judges that he was the better fighter. But here's the thing, I don't think Garry looks bad at all. In fact, I think Garry exposed something that could become extremely important for Islam's future at welterweight. Because if Islam is going to spend the final stretch of his career fighting the biggest and longest and most dangerous welterweights in the UFC, there are going to be moments where his incredible skill set is tested in ways we're not used to seeing. And that's why, despite Islam winning this fight, I'm actually more interested in what this fight tells us about the matchups with guys like Michael Morales, Carlos Prates, Shavkat Rakhmonov, because those guys bring some very serious problems.
Man, even when Islam Makhachev is challenged, I feel like my scorecard always says 4-1 and looks like he still finds ways. Tremendous main event, but ultimately Makhachev's the man.
Yeah, I mean, look, he did what he had to do and was really tested in ways that we haven't seen him tested before. I mean, it was a difficult fight. Although he won by, a good margin, a healthy margin, there was moments where you're used to Islam having a certain amount of control and dominance that he just didn't seem to have.
In the opening round, Islam looked like Islam. He immediately started doing what has made him one of the most dominant fighters in MMA history. Close the distance, get into the clinch, force Garry to defend, change levels, put him on the mat. And once Islam gets his hands connected, everything becomes a problem. And this is exactly what I said would happen. The thing about Makhachev isn't simply that he's a great wrestler. It's the way he chains everything together. You defend the takedowns, he transitions. You fight the hands, he changes positions. You try to stand, he controls you against the fence. You give him your back, now you're defending a submission, and that's what was happening throughout.
Me, I'm heavily impressed by his ability to adapt. He may not have been as dominant, as forceful and dominant, but his ability to adapt was amazing for me.
I mean, you look at the numbers here, Islam Makhachev now with 17 consecutive wins. It is the longest win streak in UFC history, surpassing Anderson Silva, whose win streak, of course, was stopped by Chris Weidman. Chris, your thoughts on what we saw tonight?
Yeah, I thought he looked amazing. It's tough. I do agree with, Rogan and Cormier and those guys, because it was harder for him. You could tell the size does matter. He wasn't able to just rag down when he got the fight to the floor. He had to really work to try to keep him down there. Wasn't able to really damage him, pass guard, and dominate the way he's used to.
And Garry knew all this was coming, right? But here's where Garry deserves a lot of credit. He wasn't simply overwhelmed, he was actually able to defend a lot of Islam's attempts. When Islam got him down, Garry was often able to work his way back to the feet. When Islam tried to establish dominant positions, Garry made him work for them. And that's really important, because against most opponents, Islam's grappling can feel like a snowball once he gets momentum. The fight becomes increasingly difficult to escape. Garry managed to interrupt that process, and that became even more important as the fight progressed.
I felt like tonight was set up for the upset. I felt like the upset could happen tonight with so much on the line, all the records that Islam has, and he's going to break Anderson Silva's record. There's weight classes for a reason. Garry is a big, rangy, strong guy who has great takedown defense. I mean, if you look at his takedown defense tonight against Islam, it was impressive. I felt like, I think that Ian is a talented guy. If he had even an ounce of killer instinct in that 5th round, he had been beating him to the body. Islam's whole, I think, right side was beat up. His face was beat up. You don't come out and hug and shake hands in the fight. That shit drives me fucking crazy when there's so much at stake. And there's also a lot of mental gamesmanship, whatever you want to call it in this game, you come out in that 5th round with a flying knee or something crazy and you try to finish the fight. I think that this is one of those fights that Ian will go back and watch and say, fuck, wish I could do that over again. And, you know, if he came out and tried to destroy and win that last round, you know, with everything that he had, I think it's a totally different fight. And then he gives Islam that explosive, you know, he exploded up and got his back, and once he took his back and put the hooks in, that was a wrap. That he's going to ride that out to the...
Honestly, I don't understand, man. This is the fight. This is not something we have to, like, hug each other every round, you know. We're going to war to broke the face, to broke the eye, you know. That's why I respect all my opponents, but Jan, I don't know, he respect too much.
What did he say to you after the fight? Because it looked like he came and
He
shot
just
you.
said, I fight today with the greatest fighter. Yeah, I respect him, you know. He's a good guy, very kind, you know. But this is the war, you know. Look my face. I just come to beat everybody. It's not some things you have to play. This is fight. This is not game.
Yo, what's up, everyone?
Like Islam knocked out Alexander Volkanovski in their rematch, he almost did the same thing against Garry. Garry was doing some good work in the clinch and looking comfortable enough to create problems for Islam, but as they separated, Islam fired a head kick. Garry went crashing to the canvas, and that moment reminded everybody that Islam isn't just a wrestler who has learned how to strike, he's a complete mixed martial artist. Islam started showing signs of fatigue around round 3. Honestly speaking, and Garry began taking advantage. He started attacking the body, he started attacking the legs, he began landing straight punches, and in the clinch he was able to create some meaningful offense, and I think that's where Islam's face got really banged up. This is where Garry's physical attributes became extremely important. The height and range difference was always a topic about this fight, but then Garry had a face-off with Islam and they looked like they were close in height, but that did not play out in the fight. The 5-inch difference definitely showed in the fight. Islam may be the superior grappler, but Garry has the physical dimensions to make those grappling exchanges more difficult. And that makes me want to talk about Michael Morales for a little bit, because Morales is the kind of matchup that makes his victory over Garry even more interesting. Morales has the size, he has the reach, he has the athleticism, and unlike a fighter who simply uses his height to stay at range, Morales is also a legitimate grappling threat. That combination is dangerous. Imagine Islam trying to close the distance against someone who's not only much taller but also capable of meeting him in the wrestling exchanges. Now, Islam can simply assume that every exchange is going to end with him controlling the opponent. Morales can make him work for those entries even more. And then there's the biggest issue, the power. Morales has legitimate knockout ability. If Islam has to cross a long distance to get to him, he's potentially walking through a much more dangerous weapon than one Garry presented.
Yeah, this is the question. As he's moved up to 170, there's some guys like Morales that are absolutely gigantic. And what happens if he fights those guys? The gap is bigger than it is with Ian Garry. Ian, again, out of the 10 victories that he's had inside the octagon, he's only had 3 stoppages.
Yep.
Morales kills everybody he touches.
Right.
I mean,
Carlos
Brady's-
Prates is a murderer. I mean, he just
yeah.
puts it on you and knocks out guys with one shot. Ian is not that same guy. He's a strategic striker who's very technical, but he doesn't have nuclear power.
Right.
Yeah.
Carlos Prates has nuclear
Right, no
power.
doubt.
Morales has nuclear
Yes.
power, and they're both massive guys.
Who do you think is the best chance of beating Islam Makhachev?
That's a different question.
Yeah, that's it. Because
So it's Carlos or Morales.
It's Morales. I think it's Morales. I think if Carlos was put in them positions that Ian were put in tonight, I think he struggles and might get finished. I think Morales has the best chance based on his athleticism, how wild and reckless he is, and maybe being able to catch something. I'd like to see Michael Morales get the next shot.
Me too. Me too. I'd like to see Michael Morales get that shot because I do think it would be the toughest test. I think he had a judo background.
And that's why I wouldn't look at the Garry fight and say, well, Islam solved the tall welterweight problem. I would say Islam solved Garry. That's different because every tall welterweight brings a different set of problems. Of course, that makes me want to talk about Carlos Prates as well. Prates might be even more terrifying from a pure striking perspective, because if you're Islam Makhachev, the last thing you want is to repeatedly enter the pocket against a guy who has nuclear power in his hands. Prates doesn't need 10 clean punches to change a fight like Garry needed. He may only need one.
This is so cool, man.
It would be fun.
He's a lot
You know what I
cooler.
mean?
Yeah, he's cooler.
Certainly cooler.
Yeah.
It'd be fun. The build up for that would be probably more fun.
man.
But when those guys are in the octagon, Morales is in there with Islam. Yeah. It could be, I mean, he's like the Francis Ngannou of that weight class. You know, one punch, that's all it takes, and you're going to sleep.
And the versatility of his striking, too. I think he will be throwing those knees up the middle. He will be looking for front kicks up the middle. The way he lays the left hand on people. If he touches you the way that Ian Garry was able to make some moments and have some success landing on the chin of Islam, it's lights out. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I think that intrigues me most.
And
I want to see Carlos Prates.
He's huge.
Yeah, he's
he gets up to like 230 huge. You know, so I don't know. If he struggled with the size of Ian, he doesn't cut that much weight. So I think trying to hold down a Morales for a long period of time is going to be tough.
Yeah, but he's the one that we're saying will probably get tired. Like, he might struggle, like, getting to the later rounds. And Islam, you talked about Ian Garry not being afraid to make the fight boring. Islam's not going to take any unnecessary chances. He won't take any unnecessary chances. He'll make you work without taking unnecessary chances. I think he might be able to get Morales tired.
Yeah, I agree with that. If he can touch him, if he can push him. And again, it might not work in the first round because Morales is going to be strong.
Oh, for sure.
In those first two, maybe even 2.5 rounds, he's really going to be able to push the pace. But if he doesn't knock you out, there's still some questions on what's he going to look like against a grappler, somebody that puts the pressure that Islam brings to the table.
Yeah, we don't want to take this fight for granted because this may be one of the only guys cardio-wise that could hang in there with Islam Makhachev. Ian Garry's got great cardio, and I don't know how those other guys deal with constant pressure, constant takedowns.
He's got to put down the smoke.
The cigarettes, you don't think are good for it? I think it gives him energy.
It makes him cool, though.
Cool.
Yeah,
and that keeps him. I think that helps his cardio just being cool all the time.
Yeah, 100%.
That's true. He got the swagger.
And that's what makes the matchup so interesting. Islam's entire game is built around calculated pressure. He wants to get his hands on you. He wants to force you backwards. He wants to make you defend. But against someone like Prates, every entry has a price. And if Islam shoots and gets stuffed, that's a problem. If Islam enters recklessly, that's a problem. If he gets stuck against the fence, that's a problem. And if he makes one mistake in the striking, he could be unconscious. That's the difference between a tall fighter and fighting a tall fighter with terrifying knockout power.
Carlos Prates and Michael Morales backstage arguing about who should get the title shot against you next, and they both want it. They both think they deserve it. How do you feel?
I don't know who I want to choose, no matter who is them. Maybe let them fight. Why they not fight in this card to see who is the #1 contender, But it's okay. I'm happy we have some real contenders in this division. And these guys, Morales, Prates, Shavkat, they make me like training every day more hard. But because I see this is the real fighters who can give me good fights.
And then imagine Shavkat in his prime. Now, Shavkat has been healing and getting better, but he's been inactive for a long while, so I don't really want to talk about him that much, but he does pose a serious threat. He has the combination of abilities between Michael Morales and Carlos Prates, and I feel like that will be a serious problem for Islam. Even if he may not be the same Shavkat, the dangerous, undefeated fighter, I think he will still be a real threat for Islam. Now, before anybody thinks I'm predicting Islam's downfall, let me make something very clear. I am not. If Islam Makhachev fights Michael Morales or Carlos Prates, I'm still going to favor Islam. as for right now, because at the end of the day, we're talking about one of the best fighters we've ever seen in the octagon, arguably the GOAT after this win against Ian Garry. Islam has already shown that he can adapt. He's shown that he can win fights in multiple ways. He's shown that he can wrestle, he can strike, he's shown he can submit people, and most importantly, he's shown that he can make adjustments during a fight. That's what separates elite fighters from generational fighters. Generational fighters don't necessarily have the answer immediately, they find the answer, and that's what Islam did against Garry. He posed a serious threat and he solved it. Garry presented problems, Islam adjusted. Garry defended takedowns, Islam kept chaining attacks. Garry recovered after being dropped, Islam continued working. Garry found success in the clinch, Islam stayed disciplined, and eventually Islam did enough to win the fight. And that's why I still believe Islam can figure out these other guys. But I also think he may have to dig much deeper than we've ever seen before.
Is there anybody in particular that you'd like to see next? I know it's tough to ask. You just got done, you walked out of the cage, but we're going to ask it.
Honestly, if you ask me today, Shavkat is not fighting, Prates still fighting, still active, and maybe Prates, because Morales also is good, but Morales fight, I don't know last time, I don't remember when he fight, you know. If you ask like who's the most deserved guy, I think Carlos Prates.